Hello everyone. Thanks for standing by and welcome to the Science of Infant and Toddler Sleep webinar, sponsored by IsisParenting and Aiden and Anae, and presented by Erin Evans. My name is Cindy Meltzer. I'm the Director of Community and Social Media here at ISIS, and I'll be your moderator this evening. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. However, you may submit questions to the speaker at any time by typing them in that chat feature located to the left of your screen. Or you can also direct them to us on Twitter using our Twitter handle at ISIS_parenting. We'll take questions as time allows, but there are very, very many of you, and we have about an hour to give the presentation, so we will take as many questions as we can, but most certainly we'll probably not get to all of them. Today's webinar is being recorded, and all of you will receive a link to the recording by email in the next 48 hours or so. So if you miss something or you need to step away to tend to your baby, that's A-OK. So let me tell you a little bit about IsisParenting. IsisParenting is proud to host this evening's webinar. We are the nation's most trusted prenatal and early parenting destination, and we provide innovative programs and a highly edited selection of products for expecting and new families in our 4 Boston area centers and online at IsisParenting.com. And then a little bit about our co-sponsor for this presentation, Aiden and Anae. Aiden and Anae is co-founded by native Australian Reagan Moya Jones, and it's been built on offering safe and essential baby products. Their goal is to create affordable products that comfort and soothe babies and toddlers and simplify the lives of their parents. Aiden and Anae is committed to educating parents not only on the qualities of muslin and swaddling, but also on the importance of safe sleep practices, which is why they partner with educational organizations like us here at IsisParenting. So as I mentioned, I'm Cindy Meltzer, and I will be your moderator tonight. And it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for this evening. Erin Evans has her PhD in sleep and circadian psychology. Erin has worked in the field of sleep medicine for 11 years and is a researcher at the Division of Sleep Medicine at Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital. At IsisParenting, Erin is a co-leader of the sleep team and a senior sleep consultant. Her research has involved investigating the effects of light on sleep and the circadian system, and she currently leads a project studying sleep in astronauts. She and her husband have 2 young sons. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm really excited to be here and share some sleep information with everyone. So one of the most exciting things about being a researcher in the field of sleep medicine is that there's so much to learn. We definitely don't know it all, and in fact, we don't fully know why we sleep. There are a lot of great studies that suggest that sleep is important for developing social skills, for learning, for memory, and we also know that REM sleep, which is a specific stage of sleep, is important in motor skill learning, which obviously is key in development of infants and toddlers. To dive right into the background and science of sleep before we get to problem solving, I want to just illustrate a few basics that will give everyone a solid foundation to build on that for that problem solving. So first I want to just say that there are 2 sleep drives. The first sleep drive is sleep pressure. And as you can see here on this scale, it's pretty simple. We have awake on the bottom. We have sleepy on the top. As you accumulate hours awake through the day, you get more and more sleepy. Pretty straightforward and easy to understand. The other sleep drive is the circadian rhythm. This is much more complicated. It's your internal biological clock. And as you can see, we have the same axes, awake and sleepy. But as you can see, the drive for sleep is quite different. We have an optimal drive to sleep during the night when we would typically be asleep. And as you can see here, this is the middle of the night. We have a drive to be awake that starts to arouse us as we reach our normal wake time. We have an opportunity for a nap in the middle of the day. and we have our strongest drive to be awake at the end of the day, right before we typically go to sleep. These two sleep drives interact in a very complex way and sometimes a very frustrating way when you're trying to predict when your child will be sleepy. As you can see here, there's an optimal window for a nap in the middle of the day. This would be true for toddlers of approximately 18 months of age all the way through adults. And we would probably all benefit from a nice afternoon siesta, but very few of us probably get to partake in that luxury. You can also see that at the end of the day there's a very complicated problem where the sleep pressure rhythm is very high in signaling for sleep, and the circadian system is generating its strongest drive to be awake. And this is obviously completely the opposite of what you would want for sleep. But that drive to be awake at the end of the day is what keeps us from going to sleep too early. It is very helpful to be awake for those extra few hours at the end of the day. But practically, this means that you can end up with a very tired child who cannot sleep. This ends up being a very fussy time in infants and a very cranky time in toddlers. This phenomenon will come into play as we discuss several sleep interventions in a few minutes. So what drives sleep? How do we get to that drive that I just explained? So sleep pressure is simply controlled by the buildup of sleep need over time. But the circadian system is your internal biological clock. And unfortunately, we all have slightly different ticking of our clock. The circadian system is reset by light exposure every day, and that's what keeps us locked into our 24-hour day where we're awake during the day and asleep at night. When we get jet lagged, it's exposure to the new light-dark cycle and the new time zone that helps us adapt. Light enters the brain through your eyes and tells the body when an appropriate wake time is happening. Our bodies lock on to that light signal, and future wakings will be likely to occur at the time of that light cue. And so, for example, if you travel to England, you're going to start waking up much earlier than you would in your local time zone, and that would start to help your body adapt. In practice for babies and toddlers, this means that when the sun rises at 5 a.m. in a well-lit room, it's going to reinforce that waking at that early hour. So in order to keep your child sleeping later, it is absolutely essential that you keep the sleep environment dark. And again, this will come up time and time again as we talk about problem solving. So sleep is not a continuous state. This is very important to remember. Infants and young children who are over 3 months of age have a very dynamic sleep pattern. Sleep is made of many stages, and on this slide you can see an example of an electroencephalogram reading of deep sleep. Deep sleep is when your neurons fire synchronously, giving us large, slow brainwave activity that we can view in a recording. During deep sleep, it's hard to wake up. And so the arousal threshold is very high, and this means that you can hear tons of noise. A fire alarm could go off. A fire truck could zoom by your child's window, and if they were in deep sleep, they probably wouldn't wake up. Deep sleep dominates the first third of the night in children over about 4 months of age. And so you may have noticed that it's relatively easy to put your children down, children of any age over 4 months. It's very easy to put them down at the beginning of the night, and usually the trouble starts as the night goes on. And that's because lighter sleep really starts to come into play as we get past that first third of the night, where stage 2 and REM sleep start to come into play. And during those stages, the arousal threshold is extremely low, so low that the creak of a floorboard would be enough to wake up your child. REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, is when we dream. And during REM sleep, adults are paralyzed from the neck down. Only our eyes move, which is why it's called REM sleep. We look around and track what we dream about and basically act out our dreams with our eyes. But we're paralyzed so we don't move around. Babies under a year of age do not have REM paralysis. And so they'll laugh, they'll cry, they'll suck, they'll fidget around and practice motor skills during REM sleep, all during the first year. After about a year, REM paralysis kicks in and allows a less fitful sleep. REM is usually the last stage of the night that we go into, and so you're likely to be woken by your child making lots of noise in those early morning hours. But before you jump up and attend to your child, make sure that he or she is actually awake, because it could just be REM sleep. So young infants spend most of their time in REM sleep, and most naps in young infants are made of REM sleep. Around 3 months, sleep begins to cycle during the night, and sleep forms 60 to 90-minute sleep cycles. At the end of each of these cycles, there's a brief arousal where we just check our environment to make sure that we're okay. Adults have these brief arousals too, but since adults are typically well settled in their sleep environment, it's rare that an adult will recognize briefly waking many times through the night. But if you accidentally fell asleep on your own couch, you probably wouldn't spend the night there. And if you think about this, it's a little bit strange that you wouldn't, because your couch is probably a safe place to be. It's in your own house. It's probably pretty comfortable. But since it's your typical sleep environment, when you hit one of those sleep cycles, it'll just feel wrong. And a similar phenomenon happens when your baby falls asleep in your arms and wakes up in her crib. So again, that's going to be very important to think about as we problem solve. So now that we've covered the basic biology, we're going to move on to laying the foundation for healthy sleep. Each of these aspects of sleep are very important, and making small changes in each of these areas can have a big impact on your child's sleep and health. The optimal sleep environment is cool, dark, and quiet. The optimal range for sleep is between 68 and 72 degrees, although in the winter months you can definitely get away with a lower temperature, but you certainly wouldn't want a higher temperature. The Grow Egg, which is a product that we have here at ISIS, is fantastic and can help you monitor the temperature in your child's room. A lot of heating systems and cooling systems don't evenly distribute heat and cooling, and having something like the Grow Egg is very helpful, because even though your own room may feel comfortable, if the door is shut in your baby's room, the temperature might not be as consistent as you think that it is. The optimal temperature for sleep as far as our bodies go is we really want warm extremities, so your fingers and toes shouldn't be icy cold, but you should have a cool core. You definitely don't want your child to be overheated, so absolutely avoid overbundling. The body temperature drops while we sleep, so it's very important to make sure your child is comfortably dressed for bed. Now, as I previously mentioned, darkness is incredibly important for nighttime sleep in order to facilitate circadian entrainment and to prevent wakings in the middle of the night. In my experience, blackout curtains and blackout shades are insufficient for creating dark enough rooms for sleep. I bought some blackout shades, and they weren't nearly dark enough, and so I added a layer to them. Still not dark enough, and so I got roller shades. And in the summer, that's still not dark enough. And so in the summertime, I actually just throw blankets over the windows in my children's room. And that allows me to entirely control their bedtimes and wake times. The sleep environment should also be dark for naps, but this isn't due to biology. This is to eliminate visual stimulation. And so the circadian rhythm doesn't really care about darkness during the day. It's certainly possible that your child could sleep in a light environment during the day. But if your child has trouble napping, and especially if you have a very active child who's interested and engaged in their environment, you want to take away any of that visual stimuli that might prevent your child from focusing and taking a nice nap. And if you make it very dark and very uninviting to do anything but sleep, your child will be much more likely to sleep. Now, when I was talking about the nature of sleep and sleep cycles, I mentioned that sleep is very light as you approach the morning, where a creaky floorboard, the turning of a door handle, the neighbor's dog, the paper boy, all of these things are enough to wake up your child. And as a result, noise machines that turn off are typically not very helpful. Remember that during the beginning of the night, your child's probably going to be in deep sleep. And white noise doesn't really have much of an impact in deep sleep because your child should be able to sleep through just about anything. But it's those early morning hours when sleep gets light that you want white noise to block out all those outside noises and creaks and groans of your house that might wake your child prematurely. In my own child's room, we use the SleepMate. It's a great white noise machine, and it prevents my child from waking up to our neighbor's alarm clock at 6 in the morning. Now, there's often a lot of questions about white noise and whether you need it or not. And generally, if you live in a very quiet environment, a quiet neighborhood where you don't have disruptors, then you don't need white noise. But if you live in a city environment, a multifamily dwelling, anywhere where those external intermittent noises could wake up your child, then you do really want to get something to just protect your child's sleep and help avoid those disruptors that could lead to an extra early waking. And the last thing that I want to talk about here, it's not on the slide, but it is important during the winter months, and that's humidity. When conditions are dry, many children will start to cough, and so consider getting a humidifier during the winter to help your child sleep. Light and darkness are obviously incredibly important. I think I've mentioned darkness probably 30 times already, and it's going to continue to come up throughout this talk. Going outside during the day is very helpful for newborns to help promote the developing circadian rhythm. And so some people talk about how their newborns are born with their days and nights confused or days and nights reversed. And this absolutely does happen. When babies are born, they have to adapt to the new light-dark cycle. And some are born with those reversed. And so going outside during the day will really help to promote that circadian rhythm. And then of course, as I said, blackout shades at night are essential to prevent an early wake time for all children. Look for sneaky sources of light. If you have a bright nightlight or a television on in your child's room in the morning or in the evening, that will have an impact too. So artificial light is certainly not as strong as the sun, but it can have the same effect if it's sufficiently bright. You want to keep a very dim nightlight in their child's room if you use one. Something like the Grow Egg, again, which monitors temperature, is also great as a nightlight because the light is very, very dim. And it allows you to just get around for safety. Another important thing to know about light is that light at different times does different things. And so if we think about jet lag, this makes sense. If you see light late into the evening, that's going to shift your bedtime later and shift your wake time later. Light in the morning will shift your wake time earlier and your bedtime earlier. And so if you're working on an inappropriate schedule, like if your child is waking too early, make sure that no matter what else you do, you keep your child's environment dim during times that you want him to sleep in the future. And so this may mean that you go to your child at 5 in the morning and you start to get ready for the day, but you don't turn on the lights, you don't open the curtains wide. You really make sure that it's a nice dim environment so that that light signal doesn't inhibit your child's ability to sleep in the future. Schedules are another important piece of the foundation to healthy sleep. Many families come to me during phone consultations and are really afraid of establishing a schedule. They feel that it's going to restrict their ability to do things during the day. And that's really not the case at all. If you have a schedule, then you're empowered. You know when your child's going to be ready for sleep, and that will help you make decisions about what to do during the day. This is true for babies and for toddlers. There's nothing worse than scheduling a class and not knowing whether your child's going to be too sleepy to go, will be too cranky to go, or will be perfectly ready to go. But when you have a schedule, you can make decisions and you can schedule classes knowing that your child's going to be ready. And then the other beautiful thing about schedules is you have to work to get them, but once you have a nice schedule going, you can break it here and there without any major ramifications. And so you'll know your baby's limits. You'll know that you can push off that nap for an hour and everything will be okay. You'll know that your toddler can skip a nap one day and everything will be okay. The general schedule will be preserved. It's just getting the schedule that's important. The other important thing about schedules is that they let you know that you're asking your baby or toddler to sleep when he's ready to sleep. A child who isn't sleepy will fight sleep, and behavior problems can occur that are associated with sleep initiation. And so imagine what you would feel like if somebody told you to lay in bed when you were wide awake and not feeling sleepy at all. It wouldn't be very nice. And so you really want to make sure that your child is truly ready for sleep when you're asking him to sleep. Your schedule doesn't need to be rigid, so you don't have to have your baby down at 7:30 every single night, but it needs to be regular. And so maybe have flexibility there. Say bedtime is between 7 and 7:30, and have a range from night to night, but have a general schedule. Babies and toddlers will not do well going to bed at 7 one night and 9 the next. If you have lots of variability in your schedule, try to make accommodations to allow your baby to sleep at consistent times, or as consistent as a time as possible each night.
Hey, Erin, this is Cindy. I just wanted to interrupt. There's lots of questions coming in, some of which Nancy is kindly answering through the chat. And I wanted to give you a chance to give a lot of your information first. But we do have a question coming in about a schedule. And so this person says, my pediatrician said a 9 or 10 o'clock bedtime is fine for my 7-month-old son if he has a late nap, because our jobs mean that my husband and I are up late each night. And this was supposed to help me get more than 4 hours of sleep in a row. But most books I read say that 8:30 p.m. is the absolute latest you should have for a bedtime. What do you think?
That is a fantastic question. And it's a complicated answer, but to simplify, your pediatrician is correct. You can have a late bedtime. Not every baby has to go to bed at 7. That said, you have to really ensure that you're allowing your child to have enough sleep. And so if your baby's going to bed at 9 or 10 p.m., then you need to make sure that your baby can have sleep in until 8, 9, or 10 in the morning. You wouldn't want to have your baby going down at 9 p.m. and getting up at 6 or 7 in the morning, because that would lead to insufficient sleep and would chronically sleep deprive your child. So as long as you keep it nice and dark in the morning, then basically you're living 2 time zones behind what the rest of the people in your time zone are living. So it's absolutely fine as long as you're accommodating for the duration of sleep that your child needs.
Great, thanks.
Right. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, so another pillar of healthy sleep is the bedtime routine. And so bedtime routines cue your child for sleep. They're incredibly important in infants and toddlers because they let your child know what's happening. And when your child knows what's happening, everything is easier. So you should maintain consistency with your bedtime routine. You don't have to do the exact same things every night, but have the same general theme. Read a book, but it can be a different book. Sing a song, it can be a different song. The last few things at the end of your bedtime routine should be the same, but the general routine itself can be varied. You want to avoid stimulating your child through wild play, because obviously that will get your child all riled up before bed and will possibly take longer for sleep to come. You also really want to make sure that all of your child's needs are met. You want to keep the lights dim, and you want to end the routine in your child's bedroom. Another good thing that you can do if you have an infant, particularly a younger infant, is swaddling. Swaddling at the end of the routine is probably the easiest way to cue a very young child that it's time to sleep. And the Aiden and Nene swaddling blankets that we have are fantastic for that. You should also work on putting your child in bed awake in order to create a positive sleep association. And we'll talk more about how to do that as we go on into problem solving. So the distribution and balance of sleep is just important as getting enough sleep. Naps are incredibly important for learning and development, and research has shown that toddlers who get regular naps will be more likely to ask adults for help when facing challenges, and that's compared to children who do not nap, who are much more likely to tantrum and get frustrated when they have a problem. In infants, you should look for nap possibilities every 2 hours. And when you're working on a nap plan, you really need to avoid allowing unintentional naps to happen. So for example, it's not very helpful to spend an hour trying to get your child to sleep in a crib unsuccessfully, and then later running an errand and having your child fall asleep in the car. When you're working on a problem, it's so important to maintain consistency. If your child occasionally falls asleep in the car and is generally well rested, you're not working on a problem in the moment, then that's fine. But while you're working on getting your child to sleep in a certain location, you do want to avoid accidental naps in other places. All children will do well with a brief nap routine to cue them to what's coming. And then finally, research has shown that naps are beneficial beyond age 3, so we shouldn't be so quick to eliminate naps.
Erin, another question here about a nap schedule. Someone is asking, when should I try and institute a nap schedule? My baby is 5 months old.
Great question. So 5 months is a great time to start working on a schedule. In babies who are under 5 months, it's certainly possible to help develop a guided schedule or a rough schedule of 3 to 4 naps during the day, maybe even 5 naps in babies who are under 3 months of age. But 5 months is about the time when the natural nap pattern starts to emerge, with about 3 naps a day, usually a nice morning nap, a consolidated afternoon nap of an hour to an hour and a half, and then a late afternoon cat nap of maybe 30 to 45 minutes. And that may not happen every single day, but it's really only around 5 months when that starts to be possible. So if you start to guide your baby into a nice nap routine as 5 months approaches, your child should really start to take your lead and follow.
Great. I always like the use of the word routine versus schedule.
Yes, routine is a gentler way to say it. So this is an example of a sleep plot. Sleep plots are very powerful tools for assessing problems. And if you plot your child's sleep, whether your child's an infant or a toddler or a preschool-age child, you can start to see trends over time, and you'll start to see optimal nap windows pop up. You'll see your child's biological best bedtime and their biological best wake time. And so to create the sleep plot, you basically just need to make a grid. You can do it in Excel. You can do it by hand on paper. And you shade in times when your child's asleep, and you leave blank times when your child is awake. And so for example, here what we have is 4 a.m. starts right here. And so this baby slept from 4 to 5 a.m., was awake for about a half hour, fell back to sleep at 5:30, and was asleep till 7, was awake for about 3 hours, and then took a nap starting at 10 for about an hour and a half, was awake for 2 hours, and then took a nap at about 1:30, and so on. So this is a fake plot. You're just basically shading in the times when your child's asleep. And so with that in mind, I want to show you a sleep plot from my own son. And so this is my youngest son's sleep for the first 400 days of his life. And as you can see, it looks a little bit crazy. But what we have here is on the left axis, we have day. So his birthday is right here. Along the top, we have time, so 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., then midnight, 6 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. again. So it's double plotted. Black is sleep, white is wake, and as you can see, where midnight follows, you look right down the middle and can see his sleep. And as we look at this, we see that there is very little distinction between day and night at the beginning. You don't really see much of a defined day and night at all until about 3 months. And this is evidence of the circadian rhythm maturing. In addition, you can see that he starts to develop a more defined day and night as we go through the sleep plot, and his bedtime starts to move earlier. My son doesn't have a particularly predictable pattern during the first 5 or so months of his life because he had many caregivers. And of course, while you can ask different caregivers to do things for you, you can't always control the routine that they follow. When he was little, we just ensured that he would get enough sleep during the day. But then as he got older, as you can see, it became a lot easier to create a pattern and to get that schedule going. And so here, from about 6 months and after, he had a 3 to 4 nap pattern, and typically a 3 nap pattern is normal. And then as he got even older, here, around age 7 to 8 months, he dropped his 3rd nap and developed a regular 2 nap pattern. These 2 naps included consolidated naps of about an hour to an hour and a half each. And the naps were around the same time each day. At the end of the plot, you can see where he started daycare, and they started to transition him to a 1 nap schedule. Now he wasn't ready for a 1 nap schedule at that time, and you can probably see that there's quite a bit of disruption associated with that. And it's common for daycares to transition children to 1 nap schedules at 12 months. The typical nap transition from 2 naps to 1 is often occurring between 12 and 18 months, but for most babies it happens around 15 months. So while it was possible for him to get by on one nap a few days a week, it definitely wasn't optimal. So know your baby, know your caregivers, and when you have to make accommodations based on things you can't control, go with the flow and make the best decisions for your family based on your circumstances. All right, so a little bit more of a sleep plot, and then we'll get on to some problems. So if you don't believe the chaos part, this is the first 2 months of my son's life blown up a little bit bigger. So we have the same axes here. You see the day of his life on the left and then time of day across the top. But you don't really see much distinction between day and night at all. And I wanted to show this because this is a period of life with a baby where you just need to survive. Take naps yourself, swaddle your baby, shush your baby. And importantly, if you don't have a baby yet, if your baby is due soon, or if you have a newborn who falls into this age range, enjoy your baby and teach your baby different ways to fall asleep rather than relying on a single way to fall asleep. So it's fine if your baby nurses to sleep, but teach her to fall asleep while you rock her. Teach her to spend a little bit of time in her crib or bassinet while you pat her and rub the bridge of her nose, rub her temple, to help her start to learn to fall asleep independently. This will help tremendously as your baby grows and develops. When your baby grows out of the swaddle, the Magic Sleep Suit is a great item to use for that transition. It's relatively new, but it's really nice because it really preserves that comfort that babies get out of the swaddle without the possibility of breaking out. And so while it is a new product, I think that it's definitely going to be the next thing in swaddle transition equipment for every family. So now we're going to transition to talking about problems. These are the most common issues that we encounter in phone consultations here at ISIS. There are many sleep problems that are rooted in biology, like waking too early, taking too long to go to sleep. And then on the psychological side, you might have a baby with poor sleep associations who wakes frequently during the night, or you may have a toddler who's getting out of bed frequently. We'll cover all of these and just a little bit more as we go through our time. So frequent night waking is probably the most common problem experienced by parents of children of all ages, and it's certainly the most common reason that we have parents call us for consultation. As a reminder, these wakings are almost always rooted in biology, but psychological sleep associations cause their recurrence. So remember, there are natural sleep cycles that happen every 60 to 90 minutes during sleep that are followed by a brief natural arousal. So the arousal part is totally normal. And as I said before, adults have these too, but we don't typically wake up fully unless there's a problem. If we're settled in our beds and we don't perceive a problem, we'll continue sleeping. Babies and young children who've learned to sleep under specific conditions will need those conditions present at the end of each of these sleep cycles. So remember, if the condition that your baby goes to sleep with is nursing to sleep and falling asleep in your arms, it's very likely that your baby is going to need to nurse and be held to fall asleep at the end of every sleep cycle. Toddlers and preschool children may develop a problem with waking at sleep cycles following a stressor. For example, something like a bee sting or something like a loud noise that wakes your child up during the middle of the night can suddenly start a string of these types of wakings. All right. So in order to eliminate sleep associations, the first thing that you need to do is make sure your child has a sleep environment that's optimal for sleep. We've covered all of the key steps there. You need to know that your child is ready for sleep when you're asking him to sleep. And always start your sleep plan at bedtime so that your baby or toddler falls asleep in the space where your child will later wake up. You want your child to identify that his or her sleep space is the right place to be. You want to choose a defined start day and track your progress accordingly. You don't want to tackle this in the moment or when you're at the end of your rope or at that moment when you just can't take it anymore, because you'll be much more likely to lose your resolve and not follow through, and consistency is extremely important. It's important to know also that when you introduce something new to your child, you will be met with resistance. And that's not because your child hates what you're doing. It's just because when you make a change, your child will have no idea why you would suddenly change things. If you've always done things one way and then you suddenly change, it's going to be confusing. Once your child has a few days of experience with the new thing that you're doing, the wakings will shorten. And it's important to note that this will happen even if you're implementing the most gradual and highly interactive strategy. Expect your child to be up for at least 40 minutes at bedtime the first day that you do something new. So for example, if you're thinking about trying to transition your baby away from, say, nursing to sleep, and you want to transition to rocking to sleep or rocking your baby to a drowsy state, that in itself will probably take about 40 minutes for your baby to accept because it's totally new. And even though it's very comforting and very gentle, it's something different, and that's hard to adjust to. If you have a baby or a toddler with a feeding to sleep association, it's important to identify how much your child's really eating at night. A child who eats a lot at night may not do well with a cold turkey removal of feedings, so collect data to figure out whether your baby is getting calories. If needed, you may need to night wean one, a few, or all of the feedings prior to implementing another sleep intervention. To do this, you might reduce nursing sessions by a few minutes each night. You might reduce the number of ounces that you offer in a bottle, or you might dilute bottles for an older child. Once your child isn't eating as much during the feedings, you might opt to implement a daddy intervention where the non-nursing parent takes charge at all wakings that are not for feedings.
Erin, a lot of people have had questions about night feedings, and I'm just going to pick this one because it seems to be a really common one. It says, our 11-month-old son is getting up around midnight and 4 and always wants some formula. When giving him only water, he will start crying and not stopping until we feed him. If he wakes up at other times, he's usually fine with just a sip of water. And basically they want to know at what age should overnight feedings be discontinued, if ever?
Great question. So with that, sometimes feedings can get kind of stuck. And if you're used to having a meal at the same time every day, it'll be very hard to suddenly stop eating. And so rather than just offering your child water instead of formula, I would just gradually reduce the amount of formula that you offer your child at night, while also offering opportunities to make up for that lost formula during the day. And so you want to replace the missing calories at night with feeding during the day. So if your child typically takes a 5-ounce bottle, offer 5 ounces tonight, 4 ounces tomorrow, 3 ounces the next night, and so on, and then transition to the water. And that should help eliminate that sleep association. And then when should feedings be discontinued? That's really an important question for your pediatrician. You'll read all kinds of things, but the most important thing is what's best for your child. And your pediatrician will have the information that you need to make that decision. Some babies can go through the night as early as 3 months. It's rare, but it's possible. Whereas for other babies, feedings at 9 months will still be very normal. So talk to your pediatrician about how much your child should be eating at night. All right.
Okay, I have.
So, yep.
Oh, sorry. I have one more question from someone is sort of representing the younger baby end of the spectrum here. So this person says, my 13-week-old is regressing and now is only sleeping 2 to 3 hours at a time through the night. The first 2 feedings she takes only 2 ounces, and the last feeding will take 5 ounces. Once fed, she immediately goes back to sleep. What can I do to help her sleep for longer periods through the night?
Great question. Yeah. So she's young, so you probably won't want to dive into anything too aggressive. But one way to do it is just start to ask your baby to go to sleep in different ways and help get the consolidation in those feedings back. So at the first wake up, you might offer that 2 to 4 ounce bottle. Let your child take as much as she wants. And then at the next wake up, if it's happening an hour to an hour and a half later, that's probably a sleep cycle. And the best thing to do at that point is try rocking your baby to sleep and see if you can ask her to do that. That'll help get the consolidation back into those feedings. All right. So lots of things to talk about. So there are many corrective techniques that you can use to get your child to skip these sleep cycle awakings. The key thing to know is that all of these techniques work. You just need to know what you're getting into and ensure that your strategy is something that you feel comfortable implementing consistently. I'm not going to go into extensive details into each of these techniques due to time. I could spend a whole hour on the nuances of any of them. But in brief, here are the general ideas. So progressive waiting, timed elimination, controlled crying are all versions of the Ferber method. The basic idea is that you teach your child independent sleep by checking in at pre-specified intervals of time. For example, you complete a loving bedtime routine, you put your baby into her bed, you give her a pat, and then you leave. You wait a minute or two, return to the room, spend about 30 seconds soothing your child and let her know you haven't disappeared, then you leave. You wait 3 to 4 minutes and return, do the same thing again. You continue increasing your waiting period until your baby falls asleep. You continue this process during non-feeding night wakings. So in a nutshell, that's the Ferber method. The simple rule strategy is just that. Your only rule is you leave your baby in the crib. You can pull up a chair, sit next to your child, provide comfort, any comfort that you can, without removing your baby from the crib. Cry it out or extinction is just not going into the room. This is attributed to Dr. Weissbluth, and typically I do recommend checking on your child at least once, especially if your child is young, since often babies do have real problems that warrant at least a check-in. Interactive intervention is akin to simple rules, and that your only rule is that your baby put herself to sleep in the crib. But if she cries, you can pick her up and soothe as much as needed. You just always put her down awake. A version of this is described in the Baby Whisperer book, so you can look there for further information on that. You can also solve problems by gradually introducing change. So simply putting your baby down a little bit earlier each day, not in time, but in experience. So a little bit more awake each night so that you can ease your child into going to sleep independently. This will take a lot longer than the strategies that I previously mentioned, but it absolutely will work if you're dedicated and can put the time in that it takes. Likewise, a toddler may benefit from a staged approach. So for example, you might start by sitting on your child's bed, then transition to the floor, then to a chair, then transition to stepping out of the room. These strategies will all work. The first ones that I mentioned will be very limited in time. They should work quickly. If they don't work quickly, that may mean that you're not addressing the right problem. So make sure that you keep an eye on the timeline. You should be out of the woods with those within about a week, with major progress during the first few days. When you take a more gradual approach like those listed on the bottom, they'll also work, but they'll probably take weeks to months to reach your goals. And as long as you have realistic timelines and are consistent, you can take any approach that fits your family. So switching gears a bit, if your child has been co-sleeping and you want to move your child into an independent sleep space, start bedtime 20 minutes later than normal to increase sleep pressure. In many cases, it's helpful to sleep in your child's room for 3 or 4 days to help your child feel comfortable in the new sleep space, and to remove the need for your child to get out of bed or call for you. Older children will benefit from having a transitional object or a lovey that you can introduce while your child's still in your bed, and then allow your child to take to the new sleep space. Late bedtimes and early wake times are definitely rooted in biology, and they can be corrected through controlling the light-dark cycle. If your child fights sleep for a long time at bedtime, start by moving bedtime to the average time that your child has been falling asleep. Keep the lights dim from your target bedtime and gradually move bedtime earlier. For example, if your child is fighting sleep till 8 p.m., but you want bedtime to be at 7 p.m., just start your routine at 8 p.m., but keep the lights dim from 7. And then each day move your child's bedtime 15 to 20 minutes earlier until you reach that target bedtime. Remember that this is a circadian problem. The circadian system promotes a strong drive to be awake right before you go to bed, so your child might actually be having their strongest drive to be awake at the time that you're trying to put him down. So you really need to do this gradually. Now, toddlers may need limit setting to maintain good habits. If your child hasn't eaten, don't get her a banana. Tell her, good night, I love you, it's time to sleep. And don't feel bad not responding to testing. It's important, though, to make sure that you have all of your child's needs met. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you're feeling guilty because you're not allowing your child to have that banana. You want to make sure that your child has had ample opportunity to eat well before bedtime so that you can feel confident denying those additional requests at bedtime. Likewise, you want to make sure that if your child needs water, water is provided as part of the bedtime routine so that you can feel confident declining a request for water. The more straightforward you are with just a simple, firm, and comforting message like good night, I love you, it's time to sleep, the more your child will get the message that this isn't time for testing, this isn't time for conversation, it's simply time to sleep. And this is probably our most common type of toddler problem that we deal with. Now, early waking is tricky because our bodies are very sensitive to light in the morning, and light's what resets our biological clocks. So first and foremost, you must keep the lights out until your target wake time. You can go to your child if you can't sleep. Just keep the lights out. It's not easy, but it's necessary. If you need motivation, just pretend that you've traveled two time zones west. And then in addition, keep the lights bright in the evening. You might also need to push bedtime later to help make this work, but it's light that's important, not the late bedtime. Often you can put your child to bed late and wake time won't move. A late bedtime without bright light will just cause sleep deprivation. So you need the light to push the system later. And then the last piece that's really important is don't expect wake time to shift for at least 3 days. This is the lag part in jet lag. Most babies under 5 months take 30 to 45-minute cat naps, and that is completely normal. After age 5 months, you want to help get your child on a sleep pattern and teach her to put herself to sleep. Toddlers have a great capacity to fight sleep. And even though they may need a nap, toddlers will often be able to power through the entire day without any sleep at all. When you're working on these problems, first ensure that you know what an age-appropriate schedule is for your child. A newborn definitely shouldn't be forced into a schedule, but a 6-month-old will benefit greatly from a schedule. When you're working on nap problems, try very hard to ensure all naps will happen in your child's sleep location and avoid opportunities for accidental naps in car seats and swings. If your child already naps with assistance, it can be useful to use these tools to help your child fall asleep on a schedule. So for example, if you're already rocking your child to sleep, you may just rock your child to sleep but on a schedule and use that to lay the foundation to have that predictability and knowing when your child is sleepy. Once you have that predictability, then you can move forward and start to teach sleep independence. It's important to choose a technique that you're comfortable with and follow through. Unfortunately, interaction may be stimulating and frustrating to children during the day, so methods like the Ferber method where you're popping in and out of the room don't actually work that well during the day. The most successful methods for babies tend to be at either end of the spectrum. So either not interacting at all, so setting a timer, doing a nap routine, setting a timer, putting your baby in the crib, waiting up to an hour, and then after your timer goes off, go get your child if they're not asleep, and have an interval of play and move on. That's a pretty strict method, and it's not for the faint of heart. Alternatively, you can just phase your baby into change through gradual adjustment. It also works very well, but it takes time. So as long as you're willing to put in the time, something like a gradual adjustment should work very, very well for those nap times. Now toddlers and naps are tricky because they're hard to safely contain and they understand a lot even if they're not very communicative. So to help with toddler nap issues, create a new nap routine. I've said consistency is important, but if your old routine is causing a battle cry, then change it. Make nap time later to ensure your child's really ready for sleep. A toddler who doesn't feel sleepy will not sleep. So you want your child to feel sleepy. And then when the behaviors are more appropriate, move nap time earlier again. You want to set rules and make them achievable. If your child is already skipping naps, set a timer for 2 minutes. Tell your child they need to lay down and be quiet. When the timer goes off, get your child up and put a sticker on a sticker chart, make pancakes for lunch, give them a reward for positive behavior, and gradually increase what you ask of your child over days. This makes your child want to engage in positive behaviors, and as days go on, increase the time on the timer. Now, if your child is testing you, again, this can happen during the day where your child says, I'm hungry, I just need some water, I want to tell you something, I need my blanket. For all of those things, again, just respond with a very simple, good night, I love you, it's time to sleep. Now, getting out of bed. This is probably what all of the toddler parents have been waiting for. Getting out of bed is extremely frustrating. So if your child is in a crib, keep your child in that crib until about age 3 if you can. But at the very least, try to avoid making the change from a crib to a toddler bed between 18 and 26 months. It's really hard during that time because a child won't understand why they should stay in bed, and so it's much harder to problem solve. Now, if you're already in this situation, we're going to talk about problem solving. And what happens is if you're in another room and your child is in their own room and they have the ability to get out, your presence apart from your child is a big enough incentive to really trump any incentive that you can give to your child for staying in bed. So if your child's getting out of bed, you have a variety of options that you can use to combat that problem. Silent return to sleep is a technique described by Dr. Weissbluth, and it's probably the best strict method for dealing with a child who's getting out of bed. You want to do your bedtime routine a little later than normal, leave the room, sit outside your child's door, and every time he gets out of bed, say good night, I love you, it's time to sleep, and walk your child back to bed. Don't respond to tests. Don't communicate with your child further. Offer a loving, consistent, and firm message in response to inappropriate behavior. Don't get angry. Don't laugh. Just keep a calm face and almost a robotic response. You may need to take your child back to bed 100 times, and I'm not kidding, 100 times for a few nights in a row, but it will work because your child will learn that there's really no incentive to getting out of bed anymore. They're just going to be walked right back to bed. The key to this is outlasting your child's willpower, and that's definitely not an easy thing to do. If that's just too much for you to think about, an alternative to the silent return to sleep is to gradually adjust your child to change. This type of plan is really best for children with anxiety. For example, if your child woke to a loud noise, triggering a need to have you close all night, you might opt for a strategy like this. And to do it, you sit with your child and then each day gradually create physical separation by moving a little bit further away. You might need to do a little bit of a dance back and forth across the room in order to help your child adapt to the movement. So for example, if the first night you move from sitting next to your child to moving to a chair, you might need to step back to your child and provide comfort and then go back to the chair and then go back to your child and go back to the chair and do that several times so that your child can understand that sitting in the chair isn't a big deal. In addition, you'll almost certainly need to do this when you step out of the room. And so the first time you step out of the room, you want to do it so briefly that it's just not a big deal for your child. They don't have any reason to get up and follow you because you've gone so little time that it doesn't matter. As your child gets used to you stepping out of the room, you can leave for longer stretches of time. Just let your child know that you're going to be leaving, that you'll come back and tuck her in as you get closer to the point where you can leave fully. But eventually you will be able to get out of the room. It'll just take a little bit more time. This will teach your child that you're not needed as part of the bedtime routine, and that when you leave, nothing bad happens. And you can combine any of these strategies with a sticker chart for positive reinforcement, but this typically only works for older children. The younger set will not really care or be interested in a sticker chart, or they may be interested, but they won't understand what it's for. There are several other methods that you may choose to use to solve the problem, but again, I could spend an hour just discussing that, and those are definitely the two best methods that I find are successful for most parents. All right. So as we approach the end, there are a few other things that are important to consider. So you may address all of these issues and still have problems. And it's really important to look at all of these possibilities. So do you drink a lot of caffeine? Could caffeine be passing through your breast milk? It's important to consider. Is your child taking sneaky naps on the way home from daycare, for example? Is that inhibiting your child's ability to go to sleep at night? Does your child have teething pain? Waking up due to teething pain is different than waking up because your child just doesn't know how to go back to sleep. So it's important to really evaluate what the source of your child's waking is. Likewise, earaches can cause a major and sudden sleep regression, and other medical issues like reflux and eczema cause major havoc with sleep, and it's important to get those medical issues treated before you implement any type of sleep intervention. So you want to make sure that you talk to your pediatrician and make sure that those conditions are as controlled as possible before you try any of the behavioral interventions that we talked about tonight. Asking your child to spend too long in bed is also problematic. Sleep disorders, if your child snores, you should definitely get your child evaluated by a sleep specialist. Postpartum depression and family instability also can cause problems with sleep and with your decision making as you go through a sleep plan and as you are making middle of the night decisions. So it's important to consider all of those factors when you're developing your plan. So what do you do for more help? Avoid Google. You can read opinions pro and against any single thing that I've talked about tonight. So go with what feels best to you. Put your plan together and implement it consistently. Talk to your child's pediatrician. Do a little bit of research before you go and buy a book, and make sure that you find a book that fits your style. Parenting groups are very helpful for bouncing off those quick questions that you might have and getting support and commiseration. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the Sleep Foundation are also great resources for basic information. And then finally, if you feel like you just need someone to talk to about sleep, we offer personalized consultations here to help you really develop a really individual plan for your child and your family. So thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it back to Cindy now. We have the sleep consultation information up there. And if you're interested in talking to one of us, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer or couldn't have you answer more questions. We had almost 800 people in here and several hundred questions come in. But if you do have a specific question, we do offer sleep consults at IsisParenting, and they're all phone-based, so you don't need to live anywhere near ISIS to get a sleep consult. We've given them for folks all over the world, really. And I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. Unfortunately, we have to end, but please remember to check your email for the presentation recording. We'll send that out within 2 days, and that will contain the slides and the audio. A lot of people are asking about this. You will get a recording with everything. We'll also include an information sheet with links to all the products and websites that Erin mentioned and that Nancy typed into the chat. So Erin, thank you so much for sharing this valuable information with our audience tonight.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for attending. We hope to see you at another ISIS online event soon. Thank you and goodbye.